It was an ordinary day. I was tending to my beloved flowers while my husband was leaving for another business trip. I had no idea that a terrible secret was hidden in his suitcase that would destroy our marriage forever. But what happens when you decide to teach a lesson to a traitor and give him the most unexpected surprise? At 62 years old, I, Sarah Miller, never imagined my life would take such a dramatic and, dare I say, spectacularly sticky turn. But here we are. It all began on a Tuesday morning, a day that promised to be as mundane as any other. The sun was a warm, buttery gold, casting long shadows across my meticulously manicured lawn. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming hydrangeas, their vibrant blue heads heavy with dew. I was in my garden, my sanctuary, my little slice of suburban heaven. My hands, despite the arthritis that had begun to stiffen my knuckles, were caked in soil, a sign of honest, soul-nourishing work. This garden was my masterpiece, a testament to decades of patience and care. Every rose, every petunia, every single hydrangea was a part of me. This was my happy place, the one corner of the world where I felt I had complete control. But control, as I was about to find out, is a very fragile illusion. My husband, Robert, had just left for what he called a business trip to Chicago. The words themselves were a well-worn lie, a threadbare blanket of deceit we had both pretended to believe for months. He said he had a conference, a big, important deal to close. I smiled, nodded, and helped him pack his suitcase, a silent participant in his little charade. He kissed me on the cheek, a quick, perfunctory peck, and told me he'd be home on Friday. I watched him drive away, the gleam of his polished luxury sedan disappearing around the corner. A part of me, the old naive part, wanted to cry, to run after him and scream, "I know what you're doing!" But the new part, the one that had been forged in the fires of betrayal and quiet desperation, just stood there, a grim, determined smile on my face. I had known for a while, not with concrete proof, but with the subtle, insidious certainty that comes from knowing a person inside and out. The late night texts, the hushed phone calls, the sudden, inexplicable need to work late. He thought I was oblivious, just another old woman content with her garden and her knitting. He thought I was a fool, and for a time I was. I ignored the signs, I made excuses, I told myself I was overthinking it. But a few days prior, while helping him get his suitcase down from the attic, I found it. Tucked away in a small side pocket was a little heart-shaped bottle of personal lubricant. It was a brand I didn't recognize, and it smelled like strawberries and cheap perfume. It was a vile little object, a physical manifestation of his lies. It was a final, undeniable confirmation of what I had feared. The heart on the label felt like a personal insult, a cruel joke. He had given me a fake heart for Christmas a decade ago that said "Made in China." Now, here was another heart for another woman. He was not a man of great originality. My first thought was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to break things. But what would that accomplish? It would only give him the satisfaction of seeing me hurt, of seeing me fall apart. And I, Sarah Miller, was not a woman who fell apart. No, this required a different approach. This required finesse. This required a certain level of cold, calculated revenge that would hit him where it hurt the most, his pride. I walked back into the house, a plan already forming in my mind. I bypassed the kitchen, where a perfectly good ceramic vase was just begging to be smashed, and went straight to my gardening shed. It was a treasure trove of tools and supplies, of things that build and things that bind. Tucked away in a dusty corner was a tube of industrial-strength superglue, the kind you use for heavy-duty repairs. I picked it up, its cool weight, a sudden, powerful reassurance in my hand. This wasn't about violence. It was about consequences, about teaching a man who thought he was above the rules a lesson he would never, ever forget. The glue was thick, viscous, and promised an unshakable bond, a perfect substitute for what he had been using. I returned to the house, my heart a silent, steady drum in my chest. I located his suitcase, the very one I had just helped him pack, and unzipped the side pocket. The little bottle was still there, a symbol of his betrayal. I twisted off the cap, the sickly sweet scent filling my nose, and poured the contents down the drain, a little piece of our life going with it. Then, with a surgeon's precision, I carefully, meticulously poured the superglue into the bottle. I capped it and shook it, the thick, heavy liquid sloshing inside. The heart on the label now seemed like a grotesque joke, a bitter punchline to a very unfunny joke. I placed the doctored bottle back in the side pocket, zipping it up with a sense of grim satisfaction. He thought he was so clever. He thought he had me fooled. He thought he was in control. Oh, how wrong he was. The old Sarah would have been a victim. The new Sarah was a strategist, a covert operative in her own home. She was a woman who was no longer afraid to fight back. I checked my watch. He had a few hours before he would be in Chicago, before he would be in a hotel room, before he would be in a very, very sticky situation. I packed a small bag for myself, a clean change of clothes, a book I'd been meaning to read. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to visit Carol. Back tomorrow. Carol was my sister. He wouldn't question it. He never did. He was so wrapped up in his own little world of deceit that he didn't even notice the cracks in ours. My revenge was a cocktail of cunning and theatricality, a performance I had been rehearsing for months without even knowing it. I was a woman on a mission, a one-woman show of poetic justice. I had a vision of him, somewhere far away, in a faceless hotel room, his smooth, practiced charm now useless. He would be trapped, not just by the glue, but by the consequences of his own actions. And I, the quiet gardener, the oblivious housewife, would be a world away, sipping a glass of iced tea and reading my book. The thought was a sweet, satisfying balm on my bruised soul. Before I leave, I want to say that this story, this kind of drama, is what I've been sharing on my channel. It's a place where we tell tales of betrayal, unexpected turns, and the sweet, sweet taste of justice. If you want to see how this all plays out, how the glue, the hydrangeas, and my son all come together, you should subscribe, because trust me, what happens next is something you don't want to miss. It's the moment the real chaos begins.
My little car, the one I had paid for with my own piano lesson money, hummed a quiet, contented tune as I drove away from the house. I had no particular destination in mind, just a desire to be somewhere, anywhere else. The house, with its perfectly mowed lawn and its manicured hydrangeas, felt like a prison, a beautiful, golden cage that I had allowed myself to be trapped in. The thought of Robert, of his deceit and his lies, was a bitter, nauseating taste in my mouth. He had been so smooth, so charming, a real Prince Charming if you only saw the outside. He had a way of looking you in the eye and making you believe his words, even when they were the most transparent of lies. It was a skill he had perfected over the years, a skill that had served him well in his little business dealings and apparently in his romantic escapades. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that felt strange in the quiet confines of my car. I was a fool, an utter, complete, and total fool. I had given him my life, my youth, my passion, my trust. And what had he given me in return? A heart-shaped bottle of cheap lubricant and a broken heart. I drove for a while, the familiar suburban landscape blurring into an unrecognizable smear of brick and asphalt. I wasn't running away. I was just leaving the old life behind, leaving the old me behind. I was on a journey to find the new me, the one that had been hidden under layers of wifely duties and quiet acquiescence. I was on a journey to find the woman who was not afraid to fight back, who was not afraid to get her hands dirty, both literally and metaphorically. The sun was a warm balm on my face, but my heart was as cold and hard as a granite stone. The initial triumph of my plan was now replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about a man who had taken my life and my dignity, and now had to face the consequences. I wasn't a monster. I was a woman who had been pushed to the edge. And every good woman, every good person has a breaking point. I had found mine, and it was a small, heart-shaped bottle of lies. My phone buzzed. A text message. It was from him. Just landed. Miss you already. I almost threw the phone out the window. The hypocrisy was so thick it was suffocating. Miss me. He was on his way to see another woman, a younger, prettier, and probably more gullible version of me. He missed the life he was leaving behind, the life he was so desperate to escape. He missed the quiet, unassuming wife who kept his house clean and his life in order. He missed the woman who made his life so easy that he had the time and the energy to betray her. He missed the person who gave him everything so he could have the luxury of wanting more. I didn't reply. I just stared at the words, the lies so blatant it was almost funny. He was a master of his own destruction, and he didn't even know it. He thought he was playing a game of cat and mouse, but he was the mouse and I was the cat. A very patient, very angry cat with a very clever plan. I parked my car at a small, unassuming diner a few towns over. It was a place I had never been before, a place where no one knew my name. The anonymity was a comfort, a small, quiet freedom. I ordered a slice of apple pie and a cup of coffee, the kind of simple, wholesome comfort that was a stark contrast to the drama unfolding in my life. The waitress was a kind-faced woman with tired eyes. She didn't ask me what was wrong. She just brought me my order and left me alone. It was a small act of kindness, but it felt like a lifeline. I was a woman in a sea of emotional turmoil, and this small diner was my lifeboat. I sat there, the steam from my coffee a warm cloud around my face, and thought about my son, Michael. He was a good boy, a kind and gentle man. He was the one person in my life who had never lied to me, who had never betrayed me. I had to protect him from this mess, from the ugly, messy truth of his father's betrayal. But how? How do you tell your son that his father is a liar and a cheat, that the man he looked up to, the man he had idolized, was a fraud? The thought made my stomach churn. This was no longer just about me. It was about him, too. It was about our family, our life, the one we had so carefully built together. And now it was all crumbling, not because of me, but because of him. The apple pie was tasteless. The coffee was cold. I had lost my appetite. I was a woman who had spent her entire life taking care of others, and now I had to take care of myself. I had to be strong. For me, for my son. I had to show him that I was not a victim, that I was a woman who was capable of standing up for herself. I was a woman who was not afraid to fight back, who was not afraid to get her hands dirty, both literally and metaphorically. The sun was a warm balm on my face, but my heart was as cold and hard as a granite stone. The initial triumph of my plan was now replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about a man who had taken my life and my dignity, and now had to face the consequences. I wasn't a monster. I was a woman who had been pushed to the edge, and every good woman, every good person, has a breaking point. I had found mine, and it was a small, heart-shaped bottle of lies. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, peaceful end to a terrible day. But my day wasn't over, not by a long shot. The night, I knew, was when the real drama would begin. I just had to wait for the curtain to rise. I found a quiet bed and breakfast a few towns over, a quaint little place with a porch swing and a garden full of roses. The landlady, a kind woman with a wide, toothy smile, seemed to size me up with a single glance. She didn't ask me what I was doing there alone. She just nodded knowingly, as if she had seen 1,000 women just like me, running away from 1,000 different kinds of trouble. The anonymity was a comfort, a small, quiet freedom. I checked in under my maiden name, a small act of rebellion that felt surprisingly liberating. The name Sarah Miller felt like a ghost of a person I used to be, a woman who was quiet, unassuming, and had no idea how to swap out a bottle of lube for a tube of superglue. This new Sarah, the Sarah Johnson on the registry, was a woman of action, a woman who was not afraid to get her hands dirty. I settled into my room, a cozy space with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a window that looked out onto a peaceful rose garden. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my phone. I was in a bubble, a little island of peace, while the storm I had orchestrated raged somewhere far away. I sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun a warm balm on my skin, and thought about Robert. I pictured him somewhere in Chicago in a faceless hotel room with his little floozy Candace. I imagined him, a man so proud of his physical prowess, so confident in his ability to charm and manipulate, now in a state of utter, helpless chaos. His smooth, practiced charm would be useless. His lies would be exposed not by me, but by the situation itself. He would be stuck, literally, with the consequences of his actions. I almost pitied him. Almost. The truth was, he deserved every sticky, humiliating moment of it. I had always been the practical one, the problem solver. If a faucet leaked, I fixed it. If the car made a funny noise, I checked the oil. I had always been the one to clean up his messes, to fix his problems. But this time, the mess was all his, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to clean it up. I was going to let him wallow in it. I was going to let him see what it felt like to be helpless, to be out of control. The thought brought a certain level of grim satisfaction. I knew this wasn't going to be a clean break, a simple ending. It was going to be messy and loud and public. But I was ready for it. I was ready for the fallout. He had made his bed, and now he was going to lie in it, quite literally. And it was going to be one very sticky, very public situation. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, a perfect, peaceful ending to a terrible day. But my day wasn't over, not by a long shot. I knew the call would come. It was only a matter of time, and I was ready for it. I was ready for the shock, the panic, the fury. I was ready for it all. I was so wrapped up in my little fantasy that I almost didn't hear the phone ring. It was in my bag, buried under a book and a change of clothes. I looked at the screen. It was a strange number, a Chicago area code. My heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and answered the call. "Hello?" I said, my voice as calm and steady as a ship on a still sea. "Sarah? Sarah, is that you? It's me, Robert." His voice was frantic, a high-pitched squeal that was a far cry from his usual confident baritone. I could hear a commotion in the background, a woman's voice, angry and panicked. I felt a small, wicked smile spread across my face. It was even better than I had imagined. "Robert, what's wrong? You sound distressed." I couldn't help the little smirk. It felt so good, this little bit of theater. "I'm not distressed, Sarah. I'm in a situation, a very serious situation." I could hear a crash, a muffled curse word. "What kind of situation, Robert? Did you miss your flight? Did you lose your luggage?" I was enjoying this far too much. This wasn't just a simple prank. It was a masterful act of poetic justice. "No, Sarah, it's not that. We're stuck. We can't we can't move. We're in a very awkward position." I could hear the woman in the background yelling something incomprehensible, her voice full of a hysterical desperation. "Stuck? What do you mean you're stuck? Are you glued to the floor, darling?" I asked, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. A long pause. He didn't answer. I knew he was frozen with the horror of the situation. I could almost see his face, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He had walked right into it, blindly and without a second thought, and now he was paying the price. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear his mind whirling, trying to find a way out, a way to explain this without exposing the truth. But there was no explaining it. There was no way to spin this. The truth was there, in every sticky, unyielding inch of his predicament. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment he realized that his actions had consequences. He had spent his life lying and cheating, and now he was literally paying the price. I had set the trap, and he had walked right into it. But what happens now? What happens when the truth comes out? Am I a hero or a villain? What will my son think when he finds out? I had a plan for revenge, but I hadn't planned for the fallout. What happens when he gets unstuck? What then? You can't leave now, not when the real chaos is about to begin. You have to see what happens next. The silence on the other end of the line was a masterpiece of a performance, a full-blown opera of unspoken truths. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head, a frantic, desperate scramble to find a plausible explanation, a flimsy excuse, a lie that would hold up for just a second longer. But there was no explaining this. There was no way to spin this. The truth was there in every sticky, unyielding inch of his predicament. The woman in the background was still yelling, a high-pitched, hysterical noise that punctuated his every failed attempt at an alibi. I held the phone away from my ear, a small, triumphant smile on my face. He had walked right into it, blindly and without a second thought. And now he was paying the price. He was no longer the charming, confident businessman. He was a man trapped, not just by the glue, but by the weight of his own lies. He was pathetic, and the feeling of victory was so potent, it was almost intoxicating. "Robert, are you still there?" I prompted, my voice a gentle prod, a verbal knife twisting in a self-inflicted wound. He finally managed to speak, his voice a pathetic whine full of shame and defeat. "Yes, Sarah, I'm here. We had a little accident. We got stuck together with a bottle of lube." The word lube came out as a strangled whisper, a confession of his humiliation. I almost laughed out loud. It was even better than I had imagined. The sheer audacity of his lie, the pathetic attempt to frame it as a mere accident, was so transparent it was almost insulting. A bottle of lube, Robert. You've never used lube in your life. Why would you have a bottle of it in your travel bag? The question hung in the air, a verbal grenade. I knew he couldn't answer it honestly. He had no plausible explanation. He was trapped, not just physically, but also in his web of deceit. I could hear a low growl from the woman in the background. She was clearly not happy. She was just as stuck as he was, and the thought of their shared humiliating predicament was a small slice of heaven. It was a joke, Sarah. Candace, she thought it would be funny to buy it, and we used it. And now we're stuck. Like, really stuck. We can't get free. His voice was a pathetic whine, the voice of a man who had lost all his power, all his control. A joke. A very unfunny joke, it seems. Have you tried soap and water? I hear that helps with sticky situations. I said, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. We've tried everything. We tried soap, we tried water, we tried oil. Nothing is working. The firefighters are here, Sarah. They're trying to separate us. The last part came out in a rush, a torrent of humiliation. My breath caught in my throat. Firefighters? This was even better than I could have dreamed. This wasn't just a personal humiliation, it was a public spectacle. The thought of my cheating husband and his floozy being pulled apart by a bunch of brave, well-meaning firefighters, it was a masterpiece, a work of art. Firefighters? Robert, what on earth have you gotten yourself into? I feigned shock, my voice a perfect imitation of a concerned wife. They're here, Sarah. They're using some kind of solvent. They're looking at us. They're looking at us like we're a couple of idiots." His voice was a strangled sob of pure, unadulterated shame. I could hear the sirens in the background, a distant, wailing symphony of justice. I felt a surge of triumph, a powerful, electric feeling that coursed through my veins. He had brought this on himself, every single bit of it. I had just given him a little push in the right direction. He had a choice, and he chose to betray me. And now he was paying the price. Well, darling, I hope you get unstuck soon. And give my regards to Candace. It sounds like you two have gotten yourselves into quite a bind. Now? Sarah, please, don't hang up the phone. What should I do? What do I tell them? He pleaded, his voice a desperate plea. Tell them the truth, Robert. Tell them you're a cheating, lying husband who got stuck with his mistress. They'll understand. Or they'll at least get a good laugh out of it, I said, and with that, I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my chair, a deep, satisfied sigh escaping my lips. The phone was silent now, the storm receding. I had set my plan in motion, and it had worked perfectly. I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhilaration. He was no longer my problem. He was now a public spectacle, a lesson in consequences. My mind, now freed from the weight of his betrayal, turned to other things. The book in my lap, the pot of tea on the table, the peaceful garden outside. Life was going to be different now. It was going to be quiet, and it was going to be mine. But as I sat there sipping my now cold tea, a small voice in my head whispered, "Is this really the end of it? Or is this just the beginning of a whole new kind of trouble? What happens when he finally gets unstuck? What then?" You don't want to miss what happens when the real fight begins. The bed and breakfast, with its peaceful rose garden and its kind, knowing landlady, was a sanctuary. It was my little bubble, a world away from the chaos I knew was unfolding. I spent the day in a state of tranquil satisfaction. The sun was a warm balm on my face, the air was sweet with the scent of blooming roses, and the silence was a welcome change from the constant low-level anxiety that had been my constant companion for the past few years. I went for a long walk, had a leisurely breakfast, and read my book, its pages a welcome escape from my own reality. I had turned my phone off, a deliberate act of defiance. I wanted to give them some space, some time to get to know each other, and the Chicago Fire Department. I wondered what was happening in Chicago. Had the firefighters managed to separate them? Was Robert embarrassed? Was Candace hysterical? The thought didn't sting as much as it used to. It was replaced by a smug, quiet satisfaction. He had no idea. He had no clue what was coming. I almost pitied him. Almost. The truth was, he deserved every sticky moment of it. The tea was a warm comfort, a small pleasure in a world that had suddenly gone cold. The landlady, a kind woman with a wide smile, asked me if I was on a little getaway. I smiled and nodded. Just a little break from the routine, I said. It was the truth, just not the whole truth. She didn't need to know the rest. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, a perfect, peaceful ending to a terrible day. But my day wasn't over, not by a long shot. The call came later that afternoon. It was on the bed and breakfast's landline, a small, polite ring that felt strangely out of place in this quiet sanctuary. I picked it up, a sense of grim anticipation settling over me. "Hello?" I said, my voice as calm and steady as a ship on a still sea. It was my sister, Carol. Her voice was a mixture of shock and amusement. "Sarah, are you okay? I heard from Robert." She sounded breathless, a little hysterical. "I'm fine, Carol. What's wrong? What did he say?" I asked, feigning innocence, my voice a perfect imitation of a concerned wife. He said you're a monster. He said you tried to get him killed. He said you put some kind of industrial glue in his lube and the Chicago Fire Department had to get involved.
Sarah, what in the world did you do? Her voice was a mix of shock and amusement. I could hear a hint of a laugh behind her words. I don't know what you're talking about, Carol. I just went to visit you, remember? I'm at a bed and breakfast right now. He must be mistaken. My performance was flawless. Sarah, don't lie to me. I know you. I know that devious little glint in your eye when you're up to something. Did you really do it? She was trying to suppress her laughter now. I couldn't help but smile. Did I really do what, Carol? I asked again, still playing the part. The glue, Sarah. Did you really swap out his lube for glue? She burst out, her voice now a full-blown cackle. I have no idea what you're talking about, Carol. I was just tending to my hydrangeas. Perhaps he's confused. Maybe he should have been more careful about what he packed in his travel bag. My voice was as sweet as honey, but the words were a sharp sting. You did it! Oh my God, Sarah, you did it! You're brilliant! The whole family is talking about it. The news, the papers, it's all over social media. A man and his mistress got stuck together by industrial strength glue. They're calling it the Glue Man scandal. She was breathless with laughter. The Glue Man scandal. It had a nice ring to it. I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. I wasn't just a scorned wife. I was a creator of a public spectacle, a mastermind of a social media phenomenon. My little act of revenge had grown into a national sensation. Well, I'm glad to hear it's getting some attention. I always said Robert had a talent for getting himself into a mess, I said with a smirk on my face. Sarah, you are a legend, a hero to all scorned wives everywhere. People are making memes. They're calling you the Hydrangea Avenger. It's beautiful, she said, and I could hear her wiping away tears of laughter. The Hydrangea Avenger. I like that even better. It was a perfect blend of my quiet suburban life and my newfound mischievous side. I was a woman of two worlds now, the quiet gardener and the public avenger. I felt a strange mix of pride and a slight nagging sense of anxiety. What would happen when he came home? What would he do? The thought made my stomach churn a little, but I pushed it down. I had done what I had to do. I had drawn a line in the sand, and he, with his cheating and his lies, had already crossed it. The phone call ended with a promise from Carol to call me with more updates. I sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun a warm balm on my skin. The world was talking about me, about my husband's humiliation. I was no longer a victim. I was a story, a cautionary tale for all the cheaters out there, a symbol of what happens when you underestimate a woman. Was I a hero or a villain? My son hadn't called. Did he know? Would he side with his father? What if this was all a mistake? What if he comes back and takes everything? Was this worth it? My mind was a whirlwind of doubt and fear. You can't leave now, not when the family is about to be torn apart. You have to see what happens next. The call from Carol ended, but the echo of her laughter and the phrase "Glue Man scandal" hung in the air, a constant reminder of the public spectacle I had created. The quiet triumph I had felt began to mix with a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer just about me and Robert. It was a public narrative, a story being written in headlines and social media comments, and I had to be ready for the next chapter. My little act of vengeance had grown into a national sensation, and that meant I was no longer an anonymous, scorned housewife. I was a character in a drama, and every move I made would be scrutinized. I sat on the porch swing, the late afternoon sun a warm balm on my skin, but my heart was a cold, hard knot of anxiety. What would happen when he came home? What would he do? The thought made my stomach churn a little, but I pushed it down. I had done what I had to do. I had drawn a line in the sand, and he, with his cheating and his lies, had already crossed it. The next day I returned home. The house was exactly as I had left it. The hydrangeas were still standing, their vibrant colors a testament to my quiet rebellion.
The silence was unnerving. He wasn't home yet. I hadn't expected him to be. The paper said he was still at the hospital being treated for being glued to a woman. The absurdity of it all was almost too much. I went through the motions of a normal day. I did the laundry, I watered the garden, I watched the news. The news report was a sight to behold. A reporter stood in front of the Chicago Fire Department, a serious look on her face, talking about a unique incident involving a domestic dispute. They didn't mention the names, but the description was too specific to be anyone else. The couple, the reporter said, was so firmly bonded they required the use of industrial solvents and a team of specialists to separate them. I suppressed a giggle. Industrial solvents. I imagined the look on Robert's face as they sprayed him down. The humiliation, the public shame. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. The phone rang. My heart sank a little. It was my son, Michael. This was the part I hadn't wanted to face. He was a good boy, a kind and gentle man. He had no idea about any of this. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine, honey. I'm home." "Why?" I asked, my voice a perfect imitation of a concerned mother. "Dad called me. He said you did something terrible to him. He said you sabotaged his trip and that the firefighters had to get him unstuck from his travel partner. What on earth is he talking about?" His voice was full of confusion and a hint of disbelief. "I don't know, Michael. Your father's been a little dramatic lately. He keeps talking about going on business trips to places he's never been before." The sarcasm was a sharp knife. He didn't seem to notice. "He said you put glue in his... He was clearly uncomfortable. "Glue, honey? Why would I do that? I'm not some crazy woman. I'm just your mom, the one who taught you to tie your shoes and not to lie to people," I said, the words a silent dagger. There was a long pause. He was processing it. He was a smart kid. He'd put two and two together. The phone was silent, a vast, echoing chasm of unspoken truths. "Mom, is Dad cheating on you?" he asked, his voice a low, pained whisper. "Michael, that's a question you should ask your father. He's the one who's been traveling so much lately. He's the one who's been so distant. He's the one who's been so sticky," I said, the word a subtle, cruel punchline. Another long pause. He was silent. I could hear his breath, the sound of a man's world crumbling. He was no longer a boy, but a man who had to face the reality of his father's betrayal. The phone call ended with him saying he needed to think. I didn't push. I had given him the truth, the messy, ugly truth. It was up to him to decide what to do with it. My victory felt a little hollow now. My son was hurt. And that, more than anything, was a price I hadn't wanted to pay. My vengeance is a bittersweet cocktail, a mix of triumph and pain. I looked at the hydrangeas again, their colors a little less vibrant now. It was all so messy, so public. Had I gone too far? Was this all worth it? Or had I just traded my quiet, private grief for a loud public humiliation that would now involve my son? I'm not sure if I'm a hero or a villain anymore. What am I? I've done the unthinkable, and now my son knows. My life is about to be turned upside down. Was this the right thing to do, or did I just ruin my family for the sake of a moment of rage? The real fight hasn't even begun, and I'm not sure if I'm ready. You have to see what happens when he comes home, when the real battle for my home and my family begins.
The days that followed were a surreal, unending blur of phone calls and text. My phone, once a quiet, unassuming object, was now a buzzing hive of activity. Friends, family, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years called. Most were on my side, their voices filled with a righteous indignation on my behalf. "Good for you, Sarah," they'd say. "He deserved it. You're a legend."
Others, a few of his golfing buddies and their wives, were more reserved, their tone tinged with a nervous disapproval. Sarah, what you did was a little extreme, don't you think? I just laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that felt hollow in my chest. Extreme. You think what he did was a little extreme? I think we all have a different definition of extreme then. The public narrative had taken on a life of its own. My little act of vengeance, my quiet, calculated revenge had become a national sensation, a cautionary tale for all the cheaters out there. I was no longer just the hydrangea avenger. I was now a symbol, a representative of all the scorned wives who had finally had enough. It was a strange, heavy mantle to wear, but I wore it with a certain grim pride. Robert, meanwhile, had not returned. He was staying with his sister Linda, he said in a text. A very short, very curt text. I'm staying with Carol. We need to talk. He had clearly misunderstood. He was staying with his sister Linda, who was his biggest offender. Linda, a woman with a face that was permanently set in a disapproving scowl, called me the next day. Sarah, what on earth has gotten into you? You've embarrassed Robert. You shamed him in front of the whole world. She was a woman who lived by appearances, a human embodiment of a picket fence, the kind of person who believes that as long as everything looks nice on the outside, it's perfect on the inside. Embarrassed him. Linda, he did that all by himself. I just provided the materials. My voice was as sweet as poison. The materials? You mean the glue? My God, Sarah, you are a menace. He's talking about a divorce. He's talking about taking the house. Her voice was a shrill shriek. The divorce. I knew it was coming. I was prepared for it. The house, however? The house? This house? The one I bought with my own savings? The one I've been maintaining for 30 years while he was off on business trips? My voice was colder now, a dangerous edge in it. The house was my sanctuary, my little island of peace. I wasn't going to let him take it. He's the man of the house, Sarah. It's his. He's the breadwinner. The breadwinner? Linda, for the past 5 years, I've been teaching piano lessons out of our living room just to pay for our groceries. I've been the one paying for our car, our utilities, our everything. He's been the one spending all our money on business trips. I was spitting the words out now, a venomous cascade of truth. The conversation ended with a loud click. She had hung up on me. The phone was silent again. The triumph I had felt earlier was now replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He was going to try to take my house, my home, my sanctuary. I wasn't going to let him take it. I called my lawyer, a kind, no-nonsense woman named Elaine. Elaine, it's Sarah. I need to talk to you about a divorce and a house, my house. I told her everything, leaving out no detail. The cheating, the glue, the public humiliation. She listened patiently, her silence a calm anchor in my storm. Sarah, you've done yourself a huge favor. You've exposed him. You've given us leverage. Leverage? I asked, the word sounding foreign. Yes, the public humiliation, the public record of his infidelity, it will all work in our favor. We can argue that he's been financially irresponsible, that he's been using your money to fund his hobbies. We can get you everything you deserve. Her words were a balm on my bruised soul. The legal system, a cold, uncaring machine, was finally on my side. The public spectacle I had created, my little act of vengeance, was now my greatest weapon. The tables had turned. He thought he could outsmart me, that he could take everything. He was wrong. He had underestimated me at every turn. He had underestimated my intelligence, my resolve, and my quiet, simmering fury. I was no longer just the hydrangea avenger. I was now a formidable opponent, a woman who knew what she wanted and was willing to fight for it. I was ready for him now. I was ready for the fight of my life. I had my plan. I had my lawyer. I had the public on my side.
But what about my son? He still hadn't called. What if he sided with his father? What if he saw me as the villain? The fight for my home was just beginning, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing my son. You can't leave now, not when the family is about to be torn apart. You have to see what happens next.
The call to my lawyer, Elaine, had filled me with a quiet, unshakable confidence. She was a professional, a woman who knew the law, and she had seen it all. She had heard my story, and instead of judging me, she had seen the leverage, the opportunity. She had seen the truth, and the truth was on my side. The public scandal, the evidence of his infidelity, the fact that he was so financially irresponsible that I had to fund our lives with piano lessons, it was all ammunition. He thought he was coming home to a defeated wife, a woman he could easily manipulate and discard. He was wrong. He was coming home to a formidable opponent, a woman who knew what she wanted and was willing to fight for it. I was ready for him now. I was ready for the fight of my life. The next day, he came home. He walked in as if he owned the place, a grim, angry expression on his face. He was still wearing the same crumpled suit he'd left in. He looked tired, defeated. The man who had left so confidently for his business trip was now a ghost of himself. His expensive watch, his polished shoes, his carefully styled hair, they all seemed a little less shiny now. He looked like a man who had been through a war, and he had. A war of his own making. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I'm not talking to you, Robert. I'm talking to my lawyer." My voice was a calm, steady counterpoint to his anger. He flinched, the word lawyer hitting him like a physical blow. "A lawyer? What for? This is our house, Sarah. Our marriage," he said, his voice rising in panic. "It stopped being our anything the minute you started traveling for business with another woman. You've had your fun, Robert. Now it's my turn." My voice was a cold, hard line. "You did this. You ruined my reputation. My company called me. They know about the scandal. I'm going to lose my job," he shrieked, his face turning a deep shade of red. "You ruined your own reputation, Robert. I just provided a very sticky reminder of your actions. You are the one who chose to betray me. You are the one who chose to humiliate our family. You are the one who brought this on yourself," I said, my voice a quiet and wavering truth. He stood there sputtering, a man with no words. His arrogance, his self-assurance had been stripped away. He was just a pathetic, cheating old man who had gotten caught in his own web of lies. "I want a divorce, and I want the house. I'm going to fight for it," he finally managed to say, his voice a low growl. "You can fight for it, Robert, but you're fighting against a woman who has a team of lawyers, a public that's on her side, and a story that's a national sensation. You're fighting against me, Robert, and I always win," I said, a dangerous glint in my eye. The door opened, and my son, Michael, walked in. He looked from me to his father, a heartbroken expression on his face. "Dad, what's going on? What's all this about a divorce?" he asked, his voice filled with a desperate sadness. "Your mother has gone crazy, son. She wants to take everything from me," Robert shrieked, turning to him for support. "No, Dad, you're the one who's gone crazy. You're the one who cheated on Mom. You're the one who ruined our family. You're the one who has to face the consequences," Michael said, his voice full of a quiet, powerful disappointment. The words were a physical blow. Robert staggered back, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face. His own son, the one person he thought would always be on his side, had turned against him. His world, the one he had so carefully built on a foundation of lies, was crumbling. The final fatal blow had been delivered, not by me, but by the person he had betrayed the most. The look on his face, a mixture of shock, shame, and defeat, was a sight I would cherish forever. It was the moment he realized that his actions had consequences, that his lies had finally caught up to him. He was a defeated man, and he knew it. My victory felt complete now. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about the truth. It was about standing up for myself and for my son. I have my son. He sees the truth. The world sees the truth. But what now? What happens after the battle is won? Is this the end, or is this the beginning of something new? I have fought for my home, for my life, and for my son. But what is my life now? I don't know who I am without him. You're on the edge of your seat, aren't you? The resolution is about to begin. You have to see what happens when the dust settles.
The divorce was surprisingly swift and painless. The public scandal, the evidence of his financial irresponsibility, and Michael's testimony were all too much for Robert to fight against. He was a defeated man, and he knew it. He signed the papers, his hand trembling, his face a mask of bitter, resentful defeat. He didn't get the house. He didn't get the money. He got what he deserved, a small, hollow victory and a lot of public shame. I, on the other hand, got everything. I got the house, the car, the savings, but more importantly, I got my life back. I got my freedom. The day he moved out was a quiet, almost anticlimactic affair. He left in a small U-Haul truck, his sister Linda a grim, silent presence by his side. They didn't even look at me. They just drove away, a small, sad procession of a defeated man and his angry defender. And with that, he was gone. My home, my sanctuary, was mine again. The silence that had once been heavy with unspoken lies was now a peaceful, quiet sound. I walked through the rooms, a strange, new feeling of lightness settling over me. I was free. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a wife. I was just Sarah. I spent the next few weeks cleaning, decluttering, and redecorating. I got rid of all of his old things, the musty armchairs, the old books, the worn-out ties. I painted the living room a bright, cheerful yellow. I bought new curtains, a new couch. The house was no longer a mausoleum of broken promises. It was a home again, my home. My son Michael was my rock. He came over every weekend, helping me paint, helping me rearrange furniture. We talked, really talked, for the first time in a long time. He told me how proud he was of me, how he had always admired my strength, even when he didn't understand it. His words were a balm, a warm comfort on my bruised soul. My friends, my sister, and even a few of his old friends rallied around me. They brought over casseroles, they helped me garden, they just sat with me and drank coffee. I was surrounded by a community of people who saw me, really saw me, not as Robert's wife, but as a woman who had stood up for herself. The Gloomance scandal had faded from the headlines, but the story lived on. People would stop me at the grocery store, their faces a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You're the hydrangea avenger, aren't you?" they'd ask. I'd just smile and nod, a quiet sense of pride swelling in my chest. The name, once a source of bitter amusement, was now a badge of honor, a symbol of my quiet, unassuming power. My victory wasn't just in the divorce, it was in the transformation. I had gone from a quiet, submissive wife to a woman who was in control of her own life. I had found my voice, my strength, my sense of self. The woman who had once been so defined by her husband was now a woman who was defined by herself. The story of my revenge was no longer a story of anger and betrayal. It was a story of empowerment and self-discovery. I had found my new normal, a life of quiet, peaceful solitude. I was learning to love my own company, to appreciate the silence, to find joy in the simple things. My garden was a riot of color, a testament to my tireless work. The hydrangeas were more beautiful than ever, their blues and pinks, a vibrant celebration of a life well lived. My home was filled with light, with music, with the sound of laughter. I was happy, truly, deeply happy. I had a new routine, a new life. I taught piano lessons during the day, I gardened in the evenings,
I had coffee with my friends. I had long talks with my son. I was a woman with a purpose, with a life that was entirely her own. I had no regrets, not about the glue, not about the public humiliation, not about any of it. He had done what he had to do. He had taught me a valuable lesson, that the greatest betrayal comes not from others, but from ourselves, from the parts of us that refuse to see the truth. I had been a coward. I had been afraid to leave, afraid to stand up for myself, afraid to face the truth. But now I was fearless. I was a woman who had been to the depths of despair and had come out on the other side stronger and more resilient than ever.
My life was perfect, or so I thought. One day, I was sitting on my porch swing, a cup of coffee in my hand, when my phone buzzed. It was an email from my lawyer. It was from Robert's lawyer, actually. An update. I opened it, a little tremor of curiosity running through me. It was a request from Robert. He wanted to see me. He wanted to talk. He says he's a changed man, Sarah. He says he realizes the mistake he made. He wants to apologize, the email read. My first instinct was to laugh. A changed man? I knew Robert. He hadn't changed. He was just a coward who had been defeated. But then I thought about it. I thought about the man who had been so arrogant, so self-assured. I thought about the man who had lost everything. The thought of seeing him, of looking him in the eye, and seeing the defeat in his soul, it was a strange temptation. It was a chance to finally, truly have the last word. The email was a test, a final test of my strength, of my resolve. Would I go back to being the old Sarah, the one who was a victim, or would I stay the new Sarah, the one who was in control of her own destiny? I smiled. I knew the answer. I closed the email and deleted it. I didn't need to see him. I didn't need to hear his apology. His apology wasn't for me. It was for him. It was a selfish act, another one in a long, long line of them. I was no longer a part of his story. My story was my own. I had won. Not just the divorce, not just the house, but my life. And that was the greatest victory of all. I took a sip of my coffee, the warm, comforting liquid, a perfect end to a long, hard journey. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful, peaceful end to a turbulent day. I had won. My story was over. Or so I thought. Just as I was about to put my cup down, my phone buzzed again. It was a text message, a picture, from an unknown number. I opened it, a feeling of cold dread settling in my stomach. It was a picture of Robert. He was standing in front of a brand new, expensive-looking house. It was a beautiful house, a modern, sprawling mansion with a huge pool and a 3-car garage. He was smiling, a smug, triumphant smile. He was standing with Candace, the woman he had been cheating on me with. She was holding a baby. A newborn baby. The text message read, "Looks like you didn't win after all. Welcome to the real world, Sarah." My world, my perfect, peaceful world, shattered. It wasn't just about a divorce. It wasn't just about a house. It was about a new life, a new family, a new beginning that he had already started, a new secret he had kept from me. The baby was a final, shocking blow. The glow, the humiliation, the divorce, it had all been a game to him. He had already won. He had a new life, a new family, a new heir. And I was just the past, the defeated, humiliated past. My victory was hollow. He hadn't just moved on. He had replaced me entirely, and he had a child with her. A baby, a new life he had built while our old one was crumbling. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal, guttural scream of pure, unadulterated shock and betrayal. My revenge, my victory, my freedom, it was all a lie. The real story was just beginning. It wasn't about a cheating husband and his scorned wife. It was about a man who had not just moved on, but had built a new, perfect wife on the ruins of my own. My hydrangeas, my home, my victory, it was all a lie. A beautiful, tragic,
heartbreaking lie. The real story was that I hadn't won. Not at all.